Hello, it's Mrs. Overton here, and I'm going to be reading you chapter 22 of our Winston story. So let's see what happens next. The fog clears. Winston sat down heavily, blinking in amazement. In his mind, the wobbly, foggy haziness of his memories slowly cleared. Suddenly, he knew what had happened all that time ago in this room. It was coming back to him in flashes and swirls. Winston closed his eyes and tried to get it all in order, to sort it tidily like he did with the post at the Mistletoe Street toy shop. The post. Of course, it all started with the post. The post in this cosy, untidy little mailroom. The place where generations of Winston's ancestors had lived, warm among the papers, helping to sort Father Christmas's post. It's no wonder I'm good at helping Oliver with it all, thought Winston with a smile. I was born surrounded by letters and parcels. He was in his memories once again, but this time they were all crystal clear, and Winston felt like a secret snooper watching his rememberings as they danced in his head. He saw the desk very much as it was now, cluttered with papers and letters. He smelt all the familiar smells. He saw the lantern with the candle flickering inside. But instead of being there alone, he could see 6 tiny little mouselings, his brothers and sisters, all tucked up and asleep. And there, right at the end, so teeny and snug in his little matchbox bed, he saw himself. His younger self was, he noted, wide awake. Just then, still in his memories, he saw his mum appear. She had a piece of string couched on her towel, and Winston remembered how at night, when everyone was asleep, she would go and help to sort the post ready for the morning. He watched as she busied over her mouselings to check on them. "Goodness me, Winston," she said when she got to his younger self. "What are you doing still awake?" Tiny Winston said he just couldn't get to sleep. "Oh dear," she said. "We know how to fix that, don't we? Come on, little Whiskers." She picked him up out of his bed and carried him past his sleeping siblings over to the lantern in the window. Snow was gently drifting past outside, and the North Star was shining like a diamond. "Our special star," she said. Then she started to rock him gently, began singing the lullaby in her quiet, gentle tone. This time, Winston could understand the words perfectly. "The snow has come, white, soft and white, glittering, glistening under the North Star's light. Hush, little mouselings, close your eyes. It's late, it's time for bed, it's time to say goodnight. But don't you worry, don't fret, go to sleep, and I'll be here, always holding you tight." "Now it really is time for bed," said his mum softly, and he followed as she put tiny Winston into his matchbox. She lay beside him, stroking his nose gently. She yawned, and it wasn't long before Winston noticed her drifting off to sleep. But little Winston was still wide awake. His stomach rumbled. "I was hungry," Winston whispered to himself, and he chuckled. "I'm always hungry." Tiny Winston sat up slowly, carefully not to wake anyone, and Winston found himself remembering this exact moment. He remembered that grumbling feeling in his stomach and had an idea had formed in his head. He decided to sneak off to the little tea break room next door to help himself to an iced ginger biscuit. He remembered thinking how happy his mum would be the next morning when she found he had brought one back for her. They were her favourites after all. Winston watched as his younger self, obviously delighted with his very important plan, climbed out of bed and tiptoed across the desk, giggling with excitement. It must have been very close to Christmas, as the room was even more cramped and untidy than usual, with sacks of presents waiting to be loaded onto the sleigh. The lantern light was very low, and with a fizz the candle inside extinguished. The room was suddenly much darker. Winston observed. His heartbeat quickened as his tiny younger self stood wobbling at the edge of the desk. It was a long way to the floor, and the drawers were closed, so there wasn't even a makeshift staircase to help him down. Tiny Winston scratched his head, thinking then he spotted a length of string. He grabbed it and tied it to one of the candy canes. Then he started to climb down over the edge of the desk, but his paws were little, and the knot he'd tied wasn't very strong, so it unravelled and bump! Winston opened his eyes and found himself back in the real world with his brothers and sisters sitting beside him. I went to get a biscuit and fell. I must have bumped my head, he said slowly. I must have accidentally fallen into a sack and then it was put on the sleigh and that's how I ended up miles away from here. His siblings all hugged him tightly. We've spent such a long time wondering what happened, said Wilfred. We thought you must have ended up with the parcels, but we didn't know where you might be. You could have been anywhere in the world. But now I'm back, said Winston excitedly, his heart drumming with delight. Memories of his brothers and sisters were flooding back to him as if he'd never been away. He remembered how William and Wilhelmina always finished each other's sentences and how Walter hiccuped when he got excited and how Winnabelle hugged her tail close to her chest when she got excited and how when she was listening to a story very carefully. It was marvellous to be back with his family, but he realised someone was still missing. 2 people, in fact. Where's our mum? He said. He was desperate to see her and tell her all about his exciting adventures, and there should be another one of us. He searched for her name. Winston. His big sister Winston, who snorted when she laughed. Wilfred was all a-fluster. Well, he said, you see, Mum found a clue. There was a letter and the boy who wrote it mentioned a mouse named Winston and a doll's house. Winnabelle rustled over in a pile and pulled out a scrap of paper. Winston recognised Oliver's writing. William started gabbling. There was something about a toy shop and a mistletoe tree and we think she's gone to find you, finished Wilhelmina. We woke up a few days ago and she'd gone, squeaked Winnabelle. There was a note on the typewriter saying, I will come home, said Walter. Winston couldn't believe it. He'd been looking for his mum and she had been looking for him. His mum hadn't forgotten him at all. She'd wanted to find him so badly that she set off alone all the way from the North Pole. She was on her way to Mistletoe Street at this very moment. Who knows, thought Winston excitedly, she might even be there already. And he imagined her tucking Oliver into bed, and it made him grin. Winston went to find her, a very important rescue mission. She sneaked into Father Christmas's sleigh and took off with it, said William. We have to catch up with her, squeaked Winston, and then find Mum. We can't, said Wilfred. There's no way to reach her. All the reindeer have gone. Winston groaned and sat down gloomily on the edge of the lantern. He remembered the shooting star he'd seen earlier while riding on Lytton's back and wondered if maybe, just maybe, that had actually been the sleigh. Just his luck to have solved the very curious mystery only to find his mum wasn't there and he was too late to get home for Christmas morning. But then he remembered something. It made him leap to his feet. He was so excited his whiskers were wobbling about like a billy-o. Not all the reindeer have left, he squeaked. And that is the end of that chapter.